Welcome back to a Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. Trump knew about the girls. That is a claim being made by a set of emails released by Democrats on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee early this morning. These emails were part of a large trove of materials handed over by the estate of Jeffrey Epstein to the Oversight Panel, which at this point had been investigating the Epstein case for quite some time. In an email dated 2019 to a Michael Wolff, Epstein was seen to say, quote, "Trump said he asked me to resign, never a member, ever," end quote. Of course he knew about the girls, as he asked Ghislaine to stop, these being a reference to Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago club and him asking Jeffrey Epstein to not join, and the Ghislaine being, of course, Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's convicted co-conspirator. Jeffrey Epstein went on to write in an email from 2011 to Ghislaine Maxwell, calling Trump a, quote, "dog that hasn't barked," and went on to discuss a victim whose name had been redacted, who he says spent hours with Donald Trump. This seeming to imply that while Donald Trump was involved and knowledgeable about Epstein's activities, he had yet to disclose what he knew to anyone, including authorities. These excerpts alone seem pretty damning, considering Donald Trump himself has denied any connection to Jeffrey Epstein's activities at all and claimed that they had actually had a falling out years ago. While they're hardly definitive proof or any sort of smoking gun, they certainly paint a picture that the president and the administration are not seeing favorably. Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt was quick to make a statement saying, quote, "The Democrats selectively leaked emails to the liberal media to create a fake narrative to smear President Trump. The unnamed victim in these emails is the late Virginia Giuff, who repeatedly said President Trump was not involved in any wrongdoing whatsoever and couldn't have been friendly to her in their limited interactions." Press Secretary Leavitt went on to say, quote, "The fact remains that President Trump kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club decades ago for being a creep to his female employees, including Giuff. These stories are nothing more than bad faith efforts to distract from President Trump's historic accomplishment, and any American with common sense sees right through this hoax and clear distraction from the government opening back up again." Press Secretary Leavitt's statements sound to me as just typical White House damage control. It's basically just saying, "Nuh-uh, that's not true. He wasn't even involved at all. He didn't talk to Jeffrey in like decades." It's just more Democrat hoax trying to distract from the great Donald Trump's great achievements because he's so great. I genuinely have no clue what great achievements he's supposed to have done, because he's done absolutely nothing of value since he took office, and it's only done very poorly. If there's any hoax being perpetrated here, it's by the administration to the American people to convince them that Donald Trump has done anything of value, because I think they know the truth is he has not. I also have to wonder if they went through the trouble of redacting the name of the individual named in that email, having spent time with Trump, why Secretary Leavitt decided to just be like, "Yeah, it's her. She's the one in the email." I assume it's in an effort to control the narrative, to be like, well, the person that it's naming is actually someone who said Trump is okay, so this is a nothing. But honestly, I question that claim. Well, I don't know if the White House press secretary had access to the non-redacted emails. I'm not really sure why anyone should take her word for it and say, "Oh, well, she says that's who was under that redaction, so I guess that's who it is." Also, it's weird that she says that they are unnamed. They're not unnamed. They're named. It's just that their name has been redacted so that the publicly disclosed statements from that email do not disclose that name. Unnamed would imply that the name of this individual was not known or not disclosed in those emails. And it is. It's just that we, the public, don't know because it's been redacted. But as more and more information comes out and the noose seems to tighten, with more and more seeming to directly implicate President Donald Trump in Jeffrey Epstein's activities, I guess it's not all that surprising the White House is trying to say anything they can to try to mitigate the damage, and for those who they can convince that things are not quite as bad as they look, when the reality is they most likely are just as bad, if not even worse, for the president. But I also think that's getting towards a larger issue, the fact that reality and facts don't matter to some people. That we know just how involved and implicated Donald Trump is in the seedier aspects of Jeffrey Epstein's stuff, let's call it. Even if it becomes difficult to directly prove that Donald Trump was involved directly in the activities, which I personally believe that he absolutely was, but even if that could not be definitively proven, it seems almost impossible to deny that at the very least he knew about them and said nothing. And those people would say to that, yeah, so what? Knowing about a crime isn't illegal. He's clearly done nothing wrong, and anyone who says he has is perpetuating the Democratic hoax. And to those who feel that way, I honestly am beginning to wonder what it would take to convince them, if there's anything that could possibly convince them that Donald Trump truly is guilty and has done serious wrong. I suppose at some level I can understand the desire not to want to believe it, to feel like everything that he'd been saying to them couldn't possibly all be a lie. But at what point does denial just become delusion, just hiding from the reality because the truth is just far too damning? I suppose to some degree it almost does not matter. Those hardest core Donald Trump supporters may be completely unreachable. They do not want to believe just how terribly they've been deceived and by how terrible a man they have been deceived by. For the longest time I believed, and maybe naively, that this was going to be the thing that would finally reach at least a fair amount of those hardcore Trumpers. They built so much of their identity around protecting the children and preserving their innocence and making sure that nothing bad happens to the kids, that I thought surely the revelation that their great and powerful president was directly involved in abuse of young girls, or at least knew of the abuse of these young girls and stayed silent and did not turn in his friend Jeffrey Epstein to the authorities, would be the thing that would erode their love and blind support of him at long last. That this was the hole in his armor that had kept him fully insulated and seemingly protected and untouchable for so long. But what I think I didn't take into account, or at least hadn't fully understood, was just how deep their capacity for self-delusion truly was. They don't want to believe that he is as awful as he is. They don't want to believe that they were so blind and so deceived that they elected this awful man to be president not once but twice. Someone who goes against some of their most core values. So when the evidence is presented to them, evidence that would to anyone else be incontrovertible, they retreat to, the facts are wrong, the reality is wrong, all of that is a hoax, it's fake. I cannot and will not believe it. You could probably present them with literal video evidence of Donald Trump committing the crimes, and they would just say it was AI fake by Barack Obama and the Clintons. I'm at a point where I don't know if even Jeffrey Epstein coming back from the dead and directly implicating Donald Trump in everything he was involved in could move the needle even a little bit with these people. And that everything involving Donald Trump has to be a Democratic hoax or a fake or a distraction, and the reality cannot penetrate their minds. So as a result, maybe the answer is to just give up on those people entirely, write them off as a lost cause, and shift the focus towards those of us who can still believe the truth of our eyes and are willing to believe reality and facts as they are presented. There can still be the appropriate consequences for him, even if everyone can't be convinced of the truth. Yes, the administration will fight it to the last, and conservatives of all types will probably still defend him and say that it's all not true and all an invention of the Democrat to smear Donald Trump's good name. And though I'd argue Donald Trump doesn't have a good name to smear, it's become increasingly difficult for those of us who live in reality to not see Donald Trump for who he is and not want him to serve justice for what he has done. I think we're getting to a point where the so-called Epstein files are going to be released very soon. And while it has been made abundantly clear that to some, nothing in those files can change their minds or cause them to regret the decisions that they've made when it comes to their support of Donald Trump, at the very least, when all is said and done and history looks back on these moments, we can at the very least say that we did what we thought was right and justice was at least attempted. Donald Trump is a man who should never have been president. Not in 2016, not in 2024, not ever. He shouldn't even have been in the running. While there is a better world out there where that never happened, we don't live in that world. We live in the reality where that did happen, and we must live with the consequences of that, including seeking the justice that has been long denied to all of Epstein's victims, and definitively establishing just how complicit Donald Trump himself was in those victimizations. As it stands, we are still living through history. There are still many chapters yet to be written, and things that we don't yet know, and things that have yet to happen. But with the long government shutdown seeming to come to a close soon, we seem to be back on the road towards justice and uncovering the full reality of Donald Trump's involvement in Jeffrey Epstein's multitude of criminal activities. As much as they want to, this administration can't stop what's coming. The truth will come to light and justice will be done. All right, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news.